Hey guys, and welcome to the Tap and Go podcast where we talk all things rugby with players, coaches, and pundits from across the world. Today, this is an episode for all you hardcore rugby fans out there. Our guest has been involved in 5 different World Cups with 3 different countries as the S&C coach. Trust me, today will be a good episode. Welcome, Calvin Morris. How's life in quarantine doing for you, Calvin?
It's good. It's good. It's a whole lot less traveling, so it's a lot less jet lag.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess getting to know your family a little bit better than you normally would. But, but yeah, it's been good, guys, and hopefully also good for you too as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's been good. So I think the most obvious place to start is where rugby is right now in the world. So obviously players are slowly getting back to playing rugby. There's going to be a return. And we see clubs around the world, such as New Zealand, Australia, having a short 4-week pre-season. What sort of effects is this going to have on firstly the players and squads in total? Because there's probably been more injuries as players have taken some time off.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to predict what's going to go on. I think everyone is right to at least point out what we believe the risks are likely to be. I think a lot of players will have been, certainly in the early stages of lockdown, just almost happy to be released from the game. As much as they love it, they're professionals. They train, almost every day, and their bodies get pretty beaten up through mid-season. So actually, to have a break to start with, I think they'd have been pretty happy about it. But then there's all right, now we need to we need to stay in shape. And I think just sort of staying physically active, again, the professional players, they'll have been pretty good. But you're right in some of this, the specific strains, or obvious place to think about is the scrum. What those guys do and trying to train for that is very, very hard when you can't one hit scrum machine or even more importantly live scrum. But then there's the other bit that they all do, and that's take contact, whether it's tackling or whether it's ball carrying or rucking. There's the timing involved in that is, players talk about it early in pre-season when you get them back into contact. It takes a little while to get that timing back. It's interesting, I don't know what the stats are like in the NRL, what's come out of the first few games of playing league. AFL just got going again, and I've listened to a few S&C coaches from Australia and the approach they've taken, trying to get guys ready for the game in terms of the ground contacts and just how you're going to move in the game and sort of the timing of it, and then moving into contact preparation at the end of a very mini pre-season. But everyone's tried to take a logical approach. Long answer, but if it's going to hit, is it going to be good enough? We'll soon find out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess a couple of weeks ago, we saw Bowden Barrett do a 4-minute 12 Bronco, breaking a club record. For all of you who don't know, Bronco is a 1.2 kilometer shuttle run. And you've been involved with the, England program in 2003 and recently Japan in 2019. What are the main differences in sort of fitness and sort of strength between the rugby professionals now and back then?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's say start with the similarities. There was definitely pride in both teams in the level of fitness that they kind of had and also wanted to get to. So the 2003 team were, they were hugely competitive as a squad, and genuinely wanted to compete against one another in terms of their playing position. So Matt Dawson versus Kieran Bracken and so on. And when you ask the players about that camp, certainly the pre-season leading into 2003, it was the level of competition that they talk about. It was super hard, but that pride in competing against one another. And it was somewhat similar with the Japanese team. They were together for a long period of time, and they genuinely wanted to drive each other to really high levels of fitness, and they absolutely got there. In terms of what's happened generally across the game, in 2003 we had 60 kilo dumbbells, and I remember 2 players doing bench press with 60 kilo dumbbells. By 2011 we had to have 80 kilo dumbbells made. 2 players used them. Almost all of the backs were using 60 kilo dumbbells. Many could use 70 kilo dumbbells. It's just the strength levels involved in the game, and that's primarily because of the professionalism of what they do in their clubs week in, week out, as that's improved. You know, when the national squad players come together, they're seriously impressive, seriously strong.
Who are the players using the 80?
Back then, Manu Tuilagi is the obvious one. But yeah, James Haskell, he had a crack at the 80s. I remember Tom Wood having a crack. Can't remember how successful he was. But there were some, and there have been a couple of the backs who would like to have had a go as well. Ugo being one of them. Yeah, there were some strong boys around back then. Yeah, the Japan team, their sort of yo-yo test, their Broncos were good, but not incredible. But you know, the sort of minimum squad standard was very good. But it was just what they were able to achieve in repeat rugby rehearsal, which we can get into more detail, you know, a few guys like later in this talk. But they were tremendously unfit, measured in a rugby way, you know, as we've learned to use GPS and how we can essentially chop up periods of games and rehearse them in training sessions. Whereas back in 2003, we didn't have that, and it was more kind of repeat 100s, 200s, 400s, almost like track-based running, and wrapped that around rugby sessions. But guys in that, I asked Marty Johnson once, when did you feel at your fittest? And he said, well, my repeat 800-meter runs were really good. So, you know, it was a different emphasis, I guess, back then on how to get fit for the game. But in terms of the standards that they applied to it, the guys were fantastic.
Mm. So do you think, in looking forward, they're going to get any new piece of technology or techniques which S&C coaches are going to use, which could develop rugby even more and develop the way fitness? Is there anything on the horizon in the next few years?
Yeah, I do think so. I think it'll be more in terms of giving each individual player some training that's a little bit more specific to their needs. And that might be in to sort of solve an injury prevention problem. It might be to enhance performance, and obviously both can work together. But I think it'll be that. It'll be a characterization of the way you're put together and how you move. You're better suited to this kind of training than this kind of training. At the moment, we're not really good at that. We're much better at giving the team what it requires, and using GPS to say, perhaps that's a bit too much for you in this session, or you need to do a little bit more, but they're based around not that sophisticated variables that come from the GPS system. I do think we'll get more sophisticated and better.
So yeah, so on that topic of GPS, so they were first implemented in training in 2009 and then in matches in 2010. What sort of, how did that completely change how rugby teams operated in training and so
on? Yeah, it definitely took a while, because you suddenly had so much data, you didn't really know what to do with it. And also it was very difficult to translate what a work rate of 120 meters per minute, for example, in 1 minute you've covered 120 meters. It's sort of, what does that mean? What did that look like in terms of the rugby? That the rugby might have been good, it might have been bad, and 120 meters in a minute isn't actually that much in terms of a distance to cover. But if you've made 5 tackles in that, actually you've worked pretty hard. So it was making sense of that data and how it translated to good or bad rugby. And that definitely took a good few years, probably 5 years. But now I think teams are starting to use it. Their objectives of why they're using it are clearer. So there's coaches who say, today's training, I want it to be above the level of a game. An international match, club match, whatever the level is. And they've got reasonably good ideas of how to do that, what to manipulate and what the standards are. And we've also become quite good at individual prescription in terms of load. That's too much, that's not enough for you, and day by day. I think those two things we've definitely across the sport gotten much better at, certainly in Tier 1.
And so we had Sir Clive on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And so we were just wondering, from being a member of his team, what was it like being under his coaching style, and what sort of image was it amongst the squad members did it create?
Yeah, he was definitely, it's funny looking back, well, almost 20 years later from when I was there. He was definitely visionary. when I joined, the guys were already the best team in the world. They're world ranked #1. So it was an interesting, again, hard to reflect at the time just how good it was. It was, after that you look back. But he wanted no excuses, and no compromise. He never wanted us, as a squad, to look back and go, if only we had. So hence there was experts everywhere. The team was very well funded. He demanded that from the RFU, and the RFU were excellent at supporting him and the team. And the players had a similar attitude. So he drove that really, really well. He had an understanding of what he calls the basics. So you absolutely have to get these things right. Set piece being one of them, restarts. It's a bit almost, they're not boring, but less exciting parts of the game. But they create possession, they create opportunity, and you have to get them right. And he knew that, and statistically could support it, which also influenced his selection. He did things like that really, really well. Knew what his building blocks for the game were. I want no compromise, no excuses. So you'll have the best of everything. And if we lose, then it's because we're not good enough at rugby. And I think having that as just as, that's how you set out your stall. I think that's really impressive. There's many things he did well. I guess one of the simple thing was there was a management meeting there was a meeting every day of all staff and all players, and that was about 50 people. And that's rare, funnily enough. It might sound crazy, why would you not do that? But he did it every day. Everyone in the team had an opportunity to talk. Most didn't, but you had an opportunity to. So one, it meant that everyone's on the same page with whatever the message was. But also, if someone comes up with a good idea, it doesn't matter who said it, it's a good idea and it gets implemented straight away. And there's a parallel there with Dave Brailsford from British Cycling and Sky. He's also very, very good at doing the same thing, moving forward with good ideas for meetings and giving everyone the opportunity to talk. So some basic stuff that Clyde did really well as obviously more sophisticated things.
Yeah. So you're involved with England in 2003, which obviously won it, 2007, which they made the final, and 2011, which they went to the quarters. What would you say were the main differences between the 2003 and 7 squad and the 2011 squad?
So 2003, very settled squad, favourites, world rank #1, beating everyone home and away. You just then go into Australia with a bunch of pressure on your shoulders, really. But the guys who created the opportunity to win, they knew how they were going to play. I think the job of Dave Redding, and Dave Redding was the lead S&C coach at the time, and I'd just come in as assistant. Our job to prepare the team was actually more simple because they knew how to play rugby and what kind of rugby they were going to play. So we tried to make it sophisticated naturally, but looking back, I think it was reasonably basic, really as strong as we could make them, as big as we could make them, as fit as we could make them. In 2007, it was a bit different. You still had the core of an experienced team with some newbies, and how to put that, they get that group together to play a kind of rugby that was appealing. It was a bumpy process, but ultimately successful. Getting to the final, I think, was a great achievement, and super enjoyable as well. Once we got over the disappointment of the early rounds, and 2011 was. It still felt like a creation of a new team. We'd had some really disappointing performances and some really good ones in the couple of years previous, but the team still wasn't settled, and the style of play wasn't really settled. And I think we went actually with a fit team, really combative team. They're fantastic in contact, and we just came up against the French team that wanted to prove something in the same way as the 2007 English team did. And they just got their game plan right and got lost by a point in the final. So, and I think England could lose to France as they did in the Six Nations this year. It just, when the French team turn up, they're bloody good.
Yeah, completely. And so going from a tier 1 countries like England, you then went to Georgia, which is tier 2. I was wondering whether you could just enlighten us a bit of the experience you have in Georgia. Obviously, it's pretty very different to the England setup. The RFU is so well funded.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, in saying that, there were no excuses for me in terms of, let's say, the environment, the equipment, the facilities. What the Georgians had was, not beautiful looking, but they had everything there. They've got a fantastic training base in Tbilisi. The pitch was half decent, good gym, training dojo, which was built for us. So like a wrestling center, hotel, kitchen, everything's on site. It's really, really good. The challenge really I think that there's a couple of challenges. One is that the way that whichever tier 2 team it is, the way that they play the game. And if you've watched any Georgian rugby, their set piece, particularly the scrum, is world class. And in contact, they're incredibly physical. They thrive on it. Wrestling's a national sport, part of their upbringing. They're warriors. Everyone's tried to invade them through the years, so they just like fighting. So they're really combative. It's playing a more expansive game and having players in the team who've held a rugby ball and passed a rugby ball for enough time to have a good sense of time and space, like a Kiwi would growing up. So that's their challenge. The other challenge is, I think it's the mental one, and this is all tier 2s, is believing you're good enough to beat a tier 1, which Japan have got there. Fiji have done it a couple of times. Tonga and Samoa a couple of times, but Georgia not yet. But they have beaten tier 2 teams ranked above them, and so they're sort of getting there. So that's the challenge, is helping them believe they can achieve something they've not done before, but then trying to add to what kind of rugby they can play.
Do you think it's time for Georgia to be introduced into the Six Nations now?
I do, and I mean, I could be biased because I've spent time with them, but I think if you compare them to Italy, for example, and the time that Italy have had in the Six Nations now, and they've beaten teams, so they've demonstrated they're good enough to be there. But I think given the same amount of time in there, Georgia would be equally as good, if not better. When you look at the level of the Georgian under-20s, they're in the Junior World Cup, and they've been in the Junior World Cup for the last 5 years. They've beaten Scotland, they've beaten Ireland, they've beaten Argentina. So they keep developing young talent now, so they're likely to stay good for a while. And their rugby infrastructure in Georgia is also good, domestic, 10-team domestic competition, etc. So they're not going to get any better unless they can play against tier 1s more regularly. So absolutely, what their route should be for that is another one for the world of rugby to decide. But I think most people out there would go, I can't see a reason why there shouldn't be promotion relegation. We welcome it. And Tbilisi is a great fun city to go to as well, in much the same way as Rome is. It's also on the same latitude, so it's dead warm in the summer, just in case you didn't know that. Yeah.
And so obviously then most recently this year you were with Japan in the autumn for the World Cup. And so most teams have a ball and play time of around 36 minutes in a full test. Jamie Joseph came to you, I believe, and said that he wants to get close to 50. So what were your thoughts on this as a tactic for rugby?
So I mean, truth, I'd love to claim all the credit for how well Japan played, but my job was a sort of consultant advisor, mainly to the strength and conditioning team. I'll come back to talk about those guys in a minute, and to add any value that I could, because I oversaw a lot of programs in tier 2 and still have friends in tier 1. So you sort of get ideas from all over the place. So it wasn't exactly like Jamie said, right, we're going to play for 50 minutes and off we go. It was more, they wanted to play the game, and Clive used to say this, is want to play the game quicker than anyone else. And they were very creative and inventive about how they would do that. Tony Brown, the attack coach, was brilliant. But they then needed the fitness to support it. So it was, even if we don't play for 50 minutes, we only play for 38 to 40, what goes on in that 40 minutes is going to be super impressive, and will be difficult for other teams to keep up with us. So for example, in the Scotland-Japan pool game, one of the best rugby games I think anyone had seen for a good while, the ball in play was 38 minutes. Every time you score a try, you lose a minute or two. And there were 8 tries in that game. The ball in play Wales-South Africa semi-final was also 38 minutes. And you go, which game would you prefer to watch? But if you think about the movement in those games, one was a box kick festival, and then the other one was fantastic, ball in hands attacking rugby. But the way Japan played, that was how they trained, for 7-8 months together, to be able to play that kind of multi-phase, not attack from everywhere, but wherever you can create and find space, then don't give the ball away, keep it in attack. So yes, they trained extremely hard, and a simple way to put it is, so if a ball in play in a decent game is 40 minutes, you get 40 minutes in 80 minutes. They trained so that they could do 40 minutes of 15 on 15 in training, but they did that inside 60 minutes. So the density of what they're able to do, and that was real good attacking rugby, that was done in less time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So you cut out all the rest essentially, and yet you can still maintain your pace of play. Fabulous. Very creative and a very good management team to be able to do that.
Yeah, because they had that thing with the Sunwolves B, didn't they? Which was quite clever. In that they sort of contract all the players, was it?
Yeah, they had basically Japan A, the Japan Wolves. So they were able to balance. So guys who needed sort of higher level of rugby, they essentially played some more Super Rugby. And those guys who either needed more time to gain fitness, Michael Leach, the captain, was a good example. He had a pretty bad injury. It took him a while to come back from it, but he needed to play some rugby. He joined the Japan A team, and they toured Australia and New Zealand and played against the B teams of like Crusaders and the other Super Rugby teams. Won all those games as well, so they came into the World Cup camp with a lot of confidence. But you're dead right. I mean, and to have that degree of control over your broad squad of 50 players for such a long time is rare in rugby. And the good thing is that the management were able to make the most of it.
So where do you think the future of Japanese rugby lies? Well, they're only going to get better, surely, with James Joseph and Tony Brown at the realm.
Absolutely. And you think of the work that Eddie did leading to 215, that Jamie did, and the fitness coach who I worked with, Simon Jones, was fantastic. And he's definitely got parallels in his character and the standards he sets with Dave Redding, who I worked with in 2003. And Dave set endurance standards, fitness standards for the team, which were incredible. And it was Simon who set the same for Japan. So the guys have got that sort of heritage now over two World Cup cycles. The game's never been more popular in Japan, in a country with a 125 million population, and there are obviously other nationalities of birth playing for Japan as well, which gives you certainly more size in your team. You're dead right. You can only see them getting better. They, like Georgia, like Fiji, arguably, are the ones who need more Tier 1 competition. With that, they absolutely will get better.
So I'm aware that you're also involved with the British cycling. I was wondering what the biggest difference is in sort of winning mentality and sort of, I guess, team ethic between the rugby players and the cyclists.
Good question. Yeah, I had a very enjoyable 3 years working with British Cycling through to Rio, and it's interesting. I think it's a different type of person that chooses either to be a track cyclist, which is the team that I work with, or an international rugby player, team sport player, and you're driven by different things. And I had a similar experience working in athletics years ago in individual sports, but everyone's still driven and committed to succeed. That's the parallel. They just are. Just choose a different sporting outlet for it. What was interesting is British Cycling, like all the Olympic sports, funded primarily through UK sport, and they're funded based on medals. So you win X many medals, you get this amount of money, and it's a really honest but rigorous process. And the teams have to come up with what they call a what it takes to win model, a very strong deterministic model. If we can cycle this time in this race, we should win. What is that going to take? And you have every layer of the model written out after that. There's arguments that it's always more difficult to do that in team sports. I'm not sure it's more difficult, it's just different. But Dave Redding again, he just published his what it takes to win model for the Football Association. that was used for England football when they went to the 2018 World Cup, showing it can be done, and it's something that binds the team that everyone works towards. And Clive had a version of it in 2003. Eddie Jones will have had a version for the World Cup last year. That's the sort of learning that I think team sports could make more of. It's being be more deterministic about what they think it's going to take to win. That was something, as I say, that I saw done very, very well with British cycling.
Yeah. And so do you think there are any lessons that can be transferred from, I know it's team-based, but relatively solo still sports of cycling to rugby?
It's as much that really. I think it's so for, let's take a sprint cyclist. They'll have a good idea of what time they need to ride in order to be successful if it's going to be the Olympic Games, and then the various factors based off of that. Actually, let's take team pursuit. It's better, but it's not better. It's easier to give you an example. The guys still need to be strong and powerful. They're sort of producing, when they're on the front of the line, 700 plus watts. But it's a 4-minute event, so it's kind of like middle distance in track and field. So you need a really big aerobic engine as well. You need to be quite strong and quick, but you need a really big aerobic capacity. Yeah. So you're always making decisions on, well, what should this, where should they bias their training? And that's no different from a rugby player. Do they need to get stronger, fitter? What skills do they need to work on the pitch? It's a balance of decisions. But in cycling, they lay out the model really, really well. So it's like, over this next 4 or 8 week block, we're going to train this. Here are our expectations. And then everyone involved in that program will sit down at the end of that block and honestly and rigorously go through it. Did we hit the goals? Why not? And so on. In my time in rugby, I've not seen that done so well. Yeah, it's kind of rigorously checking on the decisions you're making to know that you're going in the right direction. The whole ship's moving in the right direction. That's what I think will get better. And in the best places in rugby, that's probably happening. But that was the difference when I compare the two sports.
So I'm quite interested in, I guess, the book Moneyball, where they take baseball in a purely statistical sense and pretty much select the team in a completely quantitative manner. Do you think that could ever happen in rugby, or is it just a different game?
I think it already has happened to a degree, but not in the. It's not done. So Clive, for example, what he would call his basics, and why certain players were selected in the team, was with. It was sort of crystallized in his mind. So it might be based on the scrum or the line out. I need this player for that reason. Even if there's more athletic, more rounded, overtly attractive player to play in that position, I know what I'm getting from this player, and that's absolutely critical to our overall game plan. I had a chat with a friend in South Africa who said to me, and this was 6 months before the World Cup, Rassie Erasmus already knows who his best team is, and he meant it from a statistical perspective. So this player, he gives me this. These combinations of players, they give me this. And, that overall map means I'm likely to win more games than I lose. And so it's kind of already being done, a Moneyball version in team sports. It's well done in basketball. It's well done in ice hockey as well in the States. So a plus-minus system, if you've heard of that.
Well, I think we're getting close to that, all we've got time for. But just one more thing, which we've asked every one of our guests when they come on, is like their favourite part of their career. So for you, obviously, it might be a certain period rather than one exact moment. But is there anything that really sticks out for you?
Good question. In rugby, I had some great times in track and field, and Rio was obviously special with British cycling. In rugby, 2007 semi-final, beating France in their home stadium. We won the toss as well. We had the home dressing room. Everything about that, making the final, was super enjoyable with the team I was part of then. That was wonderful. Most disappointing, certainly 2011 World Cup, to exit and all kinds of stuff going on. That was disappointing, quarterfinal stage. But then, yeah, the sort of 2015 with Georgia, getting 2 wins, coming third in the pool, which gave automatic qualification for the first time in Georgia's history. That was, it felt lovely because you could see what it meant to the team and meant to the people when they got back home, the kind of reception they got. And then even, I was lucky. I was in the stadium for Japan, Scotland. So watching the team under pressure play like they trained in the best way that they could, to win the way they did, and get into the quarters was just fabulous. So that was also lovely. Different reason, but lovely.
Well, Calvin, once again, thank you so much. This has been really interesting for us. I think everyone who listens to this can definitely get an insight into rugby, which you've not necessarily considered before, especially if you don't play it. But so I just want to thank you once more.
Guys, you're very welcome. Yeah, well done in putting this series together. You're pulling together some really interesting speakers to listen to. I've already listened to Clive. I'll certainly be listening to Eddie when you get him on too. So, yeah, good luck to you guys.
Thank you very much. And then thank you very much to everyone else for listening as well. And we'll see you next week.